I originally titled this video, Paul, Skadden, Willkie, and Milbank are the four horsemen, after the four big law firms which capitulated to the Trump administration, instead of fighting the likely unlawful executive orders and actions targeted at them. But as I record this, and who knows what will happen by the time I publish this, 5 more big law firms have also struck deals with the Trump administration, including the most profitable law firms in the world, and one that I used to work at.
Shame. Shame.
Hi guys, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Cece Shia, and I am a recovering prestige addict. I went to Yale and Harvard Law School and then worked at these large law firms in New York City. I quit when I was a 6th-year associate and have spent the past 3 years interviewing and talking to more than 70 associates and partners and writing a book about big law culture. My publication journey had a little bit of a hiccup recently. You can learn more about that in my other video about how I lost my book deal. But suffice it to say, I have spent a lot of time thinking and talking and writing about law firms. Which is why I'm disappointed but not surprised that so many of the most powerful and elite law firms in the world have so easily capitulated to the Trump administration. And as always, if you prefer reading over watching, you can head on over to my Substack where you can find this full essay. Let's first take a look at the firm's rationales for striking a deal with the administration. They would never call it capitulating. They all revolve around the same 3 themes: protecting our clients' interests, protecting our employees, and protecting the capital F firm. Troublingly, the deals with 4 of the 5 firms in the second cohort actually promised to give $125 million of pro bono and other free legal services. The prior arrangements were only for pro bono legal services, which brings us to the question, what are these other free legal services? What could they possibly be? But what really takes the cake is the part of the agreement where the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, which was established by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prevent workplace discrimination, where they withdraw their public demand letters to these law firms, seemingly in exchange for the provision of free legal services. Are we really now in a country where big law firms can pay the administration to make regulatory inquiries and investigations go away? In any other country, and in this country, I would argue, this is what we would call a bribe. And look, I get that institutions want to survive, but when this myopic survival instinct contributes to the erosion of the rule of law, perhaps it is better to simply die with honor. Die and not make democracy worse for the rest of us. Because you know what I'm really going to be happy about when bribery and corruption in the federal government are just rampant? That the institutions of Kirkland and Ellis, Latham Watkins, A&O Shearman, and Simpson Thacher still exist. Praise be. But first, let's back up for those of us who haven't spent the past few weeks glued to big law firm news. Why are big law firms striking deals with the Trump administration in the first place? Because the administration proactively targeted more than 20 big law firms through executive orders and an EEOC letter. The executive orders vary slightly in language, but the crux of the administration's position is that certain big law firms take actions that threaten public safety and national security, limit constitutional freedoms, degrade the quality of American elections, or undermine bedrock American principles. They do this, the executive orders argue, through pro bono work, representing failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, and hiring Robert Mueller and his colleagues, after they wielded the power of the federal government to lead one of the most partisan investigations in American history. As a result, these firms should not have access to our nation's secrets, nor should such conduct be subsidized by federal taxpayer funds or contracts. The executive orders then lay out 4 punishments. First, suspending any government security clearances held by employees of these target firms. Second, requiring government contractors to disclose whether they have business relationships with these firms, and if they do, moving to terminate them. 3, be investigated by the Attorney General and the EEOC for racial discrimination in hiring summer associates, promotion, and attorney development opportunities. And 4th, limiting the target firm's access to federal government buildings, which presumably would include courthouses, which is a problem because, lawyers not allowed in courthouses doesn't really work, and also limiting employees of the target firms from seeking employment with the government. Make no mistake, for some law firms, this would be catastrophic. If a firm's government contracts work accounts for a substantial percentage of their overall revenue, then an executive order like this could very much be a question of corporate life or death. If a firm's M&A practice heavily depends upon CFIUS approval, I can appreciate how abjectly scary the idea of being in Trump's crosshairs is. But the problem is that Paul Weiss, Skadden, Willkie Farr, Milbank, Cadwalader, A&O Shearman, Latham, Kirkland, and Simpson Thacher, yes, I'm going to keep on naming all of them because they deserve to be publicly connected with their actions. These are not firms knocking on death's door. Year after year, they are among some of the most profitable firms in the world. Kirkland's revenue last year was $8.8 billion, or as my relatives would probably call it, a very auspicious number. Profits per equity partner were reportedly $9.25 million. Latham had revenues of $7 billion. Paul Weiss had profits per equity partner of $7.5 million. And in 2023, Simpson Thacher's profits per equity partner were a cool $6.4 million, and Skadden's was $5.4 million. Milbank and Willkie Farr weren't far behind at $5.1 million and $3.8 million respectively. And if you're a partner at Cadwalader or A&O Shearman, you'd actually be the poor ones of the bunch, with profits per equity partner of only $3.7 million and $2.6 million respectively.
It makes me feel broke. When we can't afford school uniforms, it makes me feel broke. When I'm 11, when I'm 10, it makes me feel broke.
And I know I've written before about how profits per equity partner distorts attorney compensation, right? Profits per equity partner is really the average compensation received by an equity partner, and there are a lot of partners above that and a lot of partners below that. But my point here is that profits per equity partner and revenues are still useful indicators for just exactly how wealthy a firm and their equity partners are. These are not people without savings, and if they are, they really should get a financial advisor. Which is why it is laughable to read Brad Karp's letter to the PW community, because you can always count on controversial news being addressed to a community, wherein he discusses the existential crisis that Paul Weiss faces if subject to the executive order. Only several days ago, our firm faced an existential crisis. The executive order could easily have destroyed our firm. It brought the full weight of the government down on our firm, our people, and our clients. In particular, it threatened our clients with the loss of their government contracts and the loss of access to the government if they continue to use the firm as their lawyers. And in an obvious effort to target all of you as well as the firm, it raised the specter that the government would not hire our employees. This, folks, is a masterclass in fear-mongering. In one paragraph, Karp manipulates and circles in on the reader's growing sense of dread, as if the Jaws theme were playing in the background. He goes from fears about the firm to fears around the firms, and finally, to you.
Here's Johnny.
The intent is to instill fear and then sell the solution, the deal with Trump, directly to you. So I will give Karp that. He's an excellent salesperson. He's chairman of a law firm with over 1,000 attorneys and more than $2.6 billion in revenue. You don't become chairman of a big law firm by being an excellent lawyer. You must be an excellent salesperson too. It is no surprise then that Karp's letter alternates between stoking feelings of fear and greed. The fear-greed axis isn't new, and once you know about it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Developed in 2012 by CNN, the Fear-Greed Index is a simple barometer of market sentiment for risk appetite. When fear dominates, the market sees stock sell-offs and purchases of safer assets such as treasury bonds. When greed dominates, the market buys stocks and makes riskier investments. The commonality between fear and greed is that they are strong motivators to get people to act, to engage, to do, usually buy something. If you were happy, you'd be enjoying your life, spending time with loved ones, probably eating tasty food with them, not panic purchasing canned food and toilet paper for your bunker. Happy people don't panic purchase. They just don't. But fearful and greedy people? In this way, fear and greed are extremely useful tools in marketing and advertising. They are two of the most powerful emotions when it comes to selling something. Products, subscriptions, even ideas. Pay attention the next time you're served an ad or presented with a sales pitch. Does the language exploit feelings of lack, scarcity, and the urgency of resolving a problem? Then it's a bid for fear. Or does the language appeal to desires to acquire, retain, and dominate? Then it's greed. And sometimes it's both. When Karp highlights how alone poor Paul Weiss is in the legal industry, he's invoking fear. When he cites to other big law firms coming for Paul Weiss's attorneys and clients, it's both fear and greed. He writes, "We were hopeful that the legal industry would rally to our side, even though it had not done so in response to executive orders targeting other firms. We had tried to persuade other firms to come out in public support of Covington and Perkins Coie, and we waited for firms to support us in the wake of the president's executive order targeting Paul Weiss. Disappointingly, far from support, we learned that certain other firms were seeking to exploit our vulnerabilities by aggressively soliciting our clients and recruiting our attorneys. What makes me angriest is these are the exact law firms who could weather a financial setback." Karp claims, "It was very likely that our firm would not be able to survive a protracted dispute with the administration." It's hard not to roll my eyes at that statement when Paul Weiss also reportedly paid a lateral partner $10 million in 1 year. The claim also implies that we'll very likely see the bankruptcies of Perkins Coie, Wilmer Hale, and Jenner and Block, the three big law firms choosing to fight their executive orders in court. Three firms demonstrating their extant belief in the rule of law. But this isn't just to single out Paul Weiss. Only 3 of the top 100 law firms by revenue offered unconditional support in an amicus brief in support of Perkins Coie's litigation challenging its executive order. None of the top 20 law firms by revenue dared. And merely 8 firms in the top 100 offered conditional support, the condition being that their closest peer firms also sign. And that's lawyers for you. No one wants to be first to do something, but everyone wants to be 10th. I wish I could say this surprised me, but it didn't. Those who are drawn to becoming lawyers love, or at least deeply desire, rules. Given a choice between saying nothing and potentially saying something and breaking a rule, lawyers will sadly gravitate towards the former. And I feel that fear in my bones. I really do. I am 100% certain that by posting this, I am closing off any last opportunity to ever work in big law again. And I desperately want to cling on to that possibility because I'm really scared about my future. I quit to pitch a book, I sold that book, and then I lost that book deal. And there is such a large part of me that doesn't want to deal with the emotional discomfort of living my own path anymore. That wants just to be told what to do and do that really well and never think again and make a bunch of money. Like, I want to be Paul Weiss. I want to be told that I'm doing right by a higher authority and also make a ton of money. I also understand that greed, that desire to acquire and retain and dominate, feels existential now. I am so afraid that if I don't stock up on assets now, I won't be ready when society falls apart. When I need money and resources to convince people to travel with me. When I need gold bars to bribe an officer at the border to let me into Canada. When I need $1 million for a ticket to Mars because the richest and wealthiest have decided to ransack and then abandon Earth. I've seen The Last of Us, Snowpiercer, The Handmaid's Tale. I'm really fucking scared. But I also know what I would pay for democracy, what discomforts my parents endured so they could live in a democracy, what I would give up to contribute to the rule of law. This country I really do love and call home, even if thousands would tell me to go back from whence I came. In acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, there's a concept called willingness. Willingness means choosing to act consistently with your values, even if it feels bad. And a lot of the times it will feel bad, but you don't try to change or control that bad feeling. You just sit with it and feel bad and carry on anyway, because it's what you believe in. Because there are some values in this world that are so important to you, so critical, that they are worth everything, even enduring your own bad feelings. The pinnacle example of this, if your child or dog or cat or loved one is in the middle of the road, do you stop and think about all the terrors and fears that you have before you run in and save them? No, you just run into the middle of the street. It doesn't matter how scared you are, how bad you feel. You just do the damn thing. And I care about your feelings. I care about your fear. I really do. And we can talk about these bad feelings as much as you need to. But I also need everyone, especially the Brad Karps of the world, to exhibit willingness and live their values. Karp writes in his letter, "But But no one in the wider world can appreciate how stressful it is to confront an executive order like this until one is directed at you. And that's kind of the point, Brad. Sorry, can I call you Brad? You should be doing the same thing when an executive order is pointed at you as what you would do when one isn't. You don't get to just live your values when it's easy, when progressivism is in vogue. You have to live your values when it's really hard to do so too, when it's really scary, because it's really important. It's human, it's ethical to have your values in mind, to know how much you would give up for the values that you believe in. For the decision-making partners at Paul Weiss, Skadden, Willkie Farr, Milbank, Cadwalader, A&O Shearman, Latham, Kirkland, and Simpson Thacher. God, I hope there aren't more law firms by the time I publish this that I'll have to add more to this list. For the decision-making partners at these firms, apparently the rule of law had too steep a price. But for me and you, we get to draw our own line. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, because it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is that you set it and you live by it and be prepared to die by it. And if you've made it this far and you're like, okay, Cece, what can I do? There are a lot of things that you can do. I was talking to someone I really admired about what one little person could do during these times where I feel so helpless. And they told me, you got to live your life, but then you also have to resist. And every day, do one daily act of resistance. It can be big, it can be small, it doesn't have to be life-changing, but every day, just do one act of resistance. So for law firm associates, especially if you are more senior, raise this with the partners that you work with and trust. And then think about at what point you would resign. And if it gets to that point, resign and make it a loud resignation. Better yet, coordinate with your other colleagues to make it a doubly loud or triply loud or collective resignation. Collective action is so incredibly hard, but it's also what's needed during this time. And if you don't have the financial cushion to resign, look, I get it. Try to raise this with the partners that you work with and trust anyway. Make some noise. Say something, even if it's in an anonymous feedback form, which I have totally used before and been ignored from. But I'm glad I still said something. You can also contact your law schools or your career services at your law schools to raise this issue and ask them what they plan on doing about this. A couple weeks ago, I talked to career services at Harvard Law, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by how willing they were to hear me out. And they didn't give me everything I wanted, but they were like, this is how we can help you. These are the things we can't do, and we can keep this a conversation and continue to work together. It may not seem it, but you have so much power as alumni. I usually don't say anything positive about Harvard because but I was so proud when I saw that Harvard would be standing up to the Trump administration's demands and challenging them as unlawful. But the most nourishing and low-risk thing you can do at this time is simply to connect, to talk with your colleagues, to talk with your law school friends, to keep on talking about what's happening and see if there are any ways that you can work together on something. Just today, I signed a faculty letter to Yale's president and provost, urging them to make a statement standing with Harvard. And who am I? No one. I'm a lecturer. I'm not tenured. I'm not tenure track. I'm just like a lowly lecturer on the totem. But there's a strength in numbers. And I want to tell you that your words and your opinions do matter, even if you don't think they do. Finally, one of my friends, Rachel Cohen, you may have seen her on social media. She put in her 2-week notice with Skadden when she found out that they were striking a deal with Trump. And then she did quit. She's put together toolkits, one for law students and one for law firm associates, about high risk and low risk ways that you can agitate and use your collective bargaining powers and use your voices to effect change. I'm linking them down below, and if you are a law student or a Biglaw associate, they are really worth checking out. They have templates on what you can send to partners. They have ideas for how to talk to career services. They are really, really great resources for when you want to say something but don't have the mental energy to come up afresh with what to do. And finally, if you are a law firm associate or partner and you've been engaged in these discussions with your firm and you'd be willing to talk to me on a de-identified, anonymized basis about what's going on, please send me an email. I'll put my email down below, as well as a link to a form where you can put in some information and I'll reach out to you. I would love to chat about what's going on and also to offer any support and resources and ideas to help us get through a very scary time. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. And of course, if you want more of my work, you can head on over to my Substack where I post 4 times a month about various things like this one. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and realize that joy is an act of resistance. Love you so much. See you next time. Mwah.